What changed first when my autistic child started to make progress? Hello everyone, my name is Paul. I am the father of a 9-year-old boy who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, level 1 ASD. And today I'm going to share with you the first transformative effects I experienced when I started implementing neuromodulation, which was a completely unexpected technique, something I had never planned to use and had only vaguely heard about. But I had quickly dismissed it, considering it was still experimental, that there were no tangible results yet, that it was very expensive, and so on. So I wasn't convinced. With Alexandre, I tried everything since he was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. It was a huge shock and a tremendous challenge for me. I like challenges. I'm someone who fights in everyday life. I rarely give up, and I spent an enormous amount of energy to help my son improve, to bring him closer to how he would have functioned if he hadn't had this problem, this neurodevelopmental disorder. So I tried ABA, I tried a full-time special education teacher from Monday to Friday for 1 year, 2 years. I tried socialization, sports, I tried rewards to help him develop the right habits, ABA techniques, and so on. And in reality, I think, like you, most likely the results were quite slim, or at least much less than what I hoped for my son and much less than what I truly wanted for him. So to be honest, everything actually started back when I first began the process of neuromodulation with my young son. And I immediately felt deep down that something truly remarkable had happened. From the very first stimulation session, I know my son inside out. I know because inevitably, since he doesn't speak, I learned to communicate with him, to compensate, to focus more on him, to understand how he feels in everyday life. And I immediately saw from the very first stimulation a breakthrough. Something had happened. His gaze immediately improved a little. He was more focused. He didn't speak, of course, as is the case for many autistic children. But there was a major change after a 20-minute neuromodulation session. It was as if something had clicked back into place a little, but I immediately understood that I was on the right track. His gaze improved. He was much more composed, much calmer. I immediately noticed a slight decrease in stereotypy, self-stimulation, and so on. I felt like it had a sedative effect on him. He was reasonable. He hadn't lost his mind. He was much calmer. All that functional noise had disappeared, at least temporarily. What struck me, I still have the image in my mind as I make this video, is that I saw eye contact that I had never seen before in my life with him. He looked me straight in the eyes and I felt that there was a message he wanted to convey. Alexandre, just like your child probably did, always had an issue with eye contact. That is to say, when you talk to him, he looks away. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. But this time, he looked me in the eyes like this. It lasted much longer than usual, longer than his average. And I was already struck by that. I did indeed complete that first week of neuromodulation. And to my great surprise, the very big change that for me was a trigger, even though I think neuromodulation is truly effective. When you've already reached a stage where you've been clinically diagnosed as autistic and there are really significant issues, meaning problems with communication and eye contact, restricted interests and so on. That is to say, the brain already has a relatively significant level of dysfunction. But what changed very quickly after just 1 week was that the hypersensitivity disappeared. In 1 week, and I'll let you imagine my excitement when I discovered that Alexandre very typically couldn't listen to music. He would cover his ears like this, his hands like this, probably just like your child does. He would always put his hands like this whenever there was music. When we went somewhere by car, I couldn't play music in the car. It bothered him immediately. He also had tactile hypersensitivity. I remember when I touched his leg, when I touched him, sometimes if I touched his calf or his leg, he would burst out laughing. There was a sensitivity issue. To my great surprise, after a week, by chance, music started playing. Someone turned on the music and I saw that Alexandre didn't put his hands over his ears. And at that moment, I was shocked. And I started to feel an emotion, but an extraordinary emotion. Imagine a disabling symptom that just disappears. And then I said to myself, wow, something happened. Then By accident, we go swimming at the pool and I touch his calf underwater like this. And I see that there's no reaction. He's normal. There's no reaction like usual. And at that moment, I understood that I had changed something in his brain. And I realized that neuromodulation is extremely powerful. I'm not talking from an electrical or other technical perspective. I'm talking about the impact it can have on your child. And that was already a revolution and a confirmation that I was heading in the right direction. Today, it's been 3 months. Some time has passed. I note that the stereotypies and self-stimulations have almost completely disappeared. He no longer writes the alphabet or numbers on a slate. He writes words. He no longer makes those strange little noises like he used to do before. He would write in the air like this. He would start crying, laughing. He would have regular tantrums. He couldn't stay focused for 20 minutes. He had to get up. He would go cry. He was unable to concentrate. Now he can take a 2 or 3 hour exam. He could sit for a university test. I'm joking. But what I mean is that he sits at the table with the educator. He works 7 hours a day at a desk and there's no problem. Sometimes he complains a little bit because he needs to take a breather, but he has a level of concentration similar to that of a neurotypical child. The defining feature of autism is restricted interests, meaning that when a child does not have restricted interests, the neurologist and the ADOS technique, which is the main method used to diagnose autism in children today, do not allow for an autism diagnosis to be made. When restricted interests are not present, communicative dysfunction alone is not sufficient to diagnose autism. According to international standards for classifying a child as autistic, I'm not saying that my son no longer has autistic symptoms, far from it. But I am saying that a very important component of the symptoms he had has completely disappeared. And just for that alone, it was already tremendously worth it. Because the more time passes, the less plasticity there is, and the harder it becomes to heal oneself. Today, he is 9 years old. Plasticity is still significant, but I have already missed some very important windows of plasticity. I'm not even talking about ages 0 to 3. I'm talking about ages 0 to 6, even up to 7 or 8 years old. Now, today, he's 9 years old. He's going to turn 10. The biggest windows of plasticity are already behind us. But the earlier we act, the better, because we can take advantage of those windows of plasticity. At the level of the brain's electrophysiological functioning, which has apparently been partially improved. Another thing is that today, my son cognitively, so this isn't the very first change, but it's one of the outcomes, cognitively, he processes information faster. He's much more efficient academically. He's able to concentrate for much longer periods, as I mentioned before. But now his ability to work, to focus, his cognitive work capacity is much more advanced, much greater. And these are improvements. I've observed these cascading improvements in him, and they seem major to me. As things stand now, I'll keep you updated in future videos about other developments. I'll share what happens with Alexandre as I continue this intensive neuromodulation program I've set up, since Alex receives stimulation almost every day. To this, I add a full-time educator. So I'm really doing everything I can. I think this is really the best synergy we can have. That is to say, neuromodulation will repair the brain's electrophysiological functioning. And above all, it will open windows of plasticity. In other words, it will allow the brain to be much more receptive to learning and to learn much more quickly. That means that with 1 hour of ABA, for example, 1 hour of stimulation exercises, he will learn what he would have learned in 3 hours. This is supported by the scientific literature. I encourage you to look into it. I've included a bit in the description of this video, but you can also find more on PubMed or Google Scholar. The impact of neuromodulation on the brain's processing speed, on cerebral performance. And in the case of a child who is dysfunctional, we will specifically improve these cerebral electrophysiological dysfunctions. And I think there are a lot of children who have this kind of problem today. So if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe. That way you'll be kept up to date on Alexandre's progress regarding the evolution of his autistic symptoms. I have already eliminated many of them. I have already eliminated many autistic symptom effects. I already have a partial reversal of his autism. It may sound exceptional to say, but it's true. It's true. So there you have it. I will share these different developments with you in upcoming videos. And so if you did enjoy this video, I invite you to subscribe. And of course, I wish you good luck. and I wish your child the best possible improvement.